Have you ever heard someone say, "I am my own worst enemy"? What about, "I got in my own way"? Those are ways of saying that they were in conflict within themselves. So today I want to talk about how best to utilize person versus self conflicts in writing. Because of our own doubts and insecurities, we can get in our own way and prevent ourselves from achieving our goals and reaching our desires. I do this sometimes, as do most people, so your characters should too. This inner conflict can both contribute to character growth and advance the plot. So if you hang on until the end of this video, I'll tell you how you can get a character chart that will help you develop your characters quickly so you're ready to start writing those internal conflicts. This is Ignited Ink Writing, a channel dedicated to helping authors like you transform your writing so it lingers with your readers, because writing that lingers gets remembered and recommended to others. I'm Caitlin Burvey, editor and author. Let's start with person versus self conflict is about character growth. In a previous video, Why You Need Internal and External Conflict in Creative Writing, I explained how conflict is a force acting against your characters. When you have person versus self conflict, a piece of your characters that's inside themselves is that force that is acting against them. In order to overcome this conflict, your characters then must grow and change as people. This is why person versus self conflict can be so powerful. It innately creates character growths and arcs. Now, how do you create person versus self conflict? I like to start by thinking about my characters' weaknesses. What are their fears and insecurities? What are their beliefs? How can I force my characters to face those things? That's going to create conflict. For example, if my character has low self-esteem, I might force them to have to get dressed up and network. Or if my character has trouble saying no, I'm going to put them in a situation where they either have to say no or face serious consequences. That's going to be more interesting for my readers to read, is them confronting that insecurity or fear. Another way you can create internal conflict is to challenge your character's beliefs. Linda Kenneman experiences this in her short story, Love's Farewell, which was published in Chicken Soup for the Soul, Messages from Heaven and Other Miracles. Now, this is nonfiction, so in the scene that I'm about to share with you, Linda is a nurse tending to her patient. She's the narrator. Pulling a chair up to her bedside, I took a seat and held her hand. "It's Linda, I'm back, and David is on his way." Julie couldn't open her eyes or speak, but as long as her heart was beating, she could listen. "Your first hospital admission seems like yesterday, but I guess it was 6 months ago now. When I saw your diagnosis of lung cancer, well, I don't want to say I blamed you, but there was a certain reassurance there. I thought smoking was where we were different. When you told me you had never smoked, I was so angry. I wanted desperately to blame someone or something for what was happening to you. You, though, handled it with grace and peace." As I teetered on the edge of losing a friend rather than a patient, the door burst open. David was in the lead, followed by parents, in-laws, aunts, and uncles. When young people die, it is a very different situation than it is for elderly patients. They have not outlived any of the people who love them. This short, almost flash fiction story is one of my favorite examples of conflict because it has so many different conflicts packed into such a short space. In this one piece of this scene, there are arguably two types of internal conflict. The main one is Linda, the nurse. She has this core belief that people earn their fate, that if you make the right choices and decisions, you'll be okay. Now she is faced with someone who did make those right choices and decisions, and this person is not okay. They are dying of cancer. So Linda's beliefs were challenged, and it creates a conflict within her. We also see another form of internal conflict, depending on your philosophical belief, which is the cancer itself. If you view the body as a part of the self, then cancer is a force acting against you. It is a person versus self type of conflict. So the patient is also facing her own internal conflict at the same time. However, if your philosophical leanings are slightly different than that, you might view the body as a part of nature instead of a part of the self. In that case, we would classify this cancer as a person versus nature conflict. The same can be said for other types of illnesses, infections, or mental illnesses. Those are also forms of either person versus self or person versus nature, depending on your philosophical leanings and how you write your story. So that's one way you can approach creating person versus self conflict within your story. You can look at your characters' beliefs and challenge them. You can also look at their weaknesses, their insecurities, their fears, and force your character to face those too. The great thing about this type of conflict is it's going to almost automatically lead to character growth. Because if your character is facing these same situations over and over again, they're not going to make the same choice each time if the choice didn't turn out very well last time. That's going to force them to change and grow. But person versus self isn't only about character growth. So next I want to share how person versus self conflict should impact the plot. At first glance, person versus self conflict is primarily internal. It affects the character and not so much the plot. But this isn't necessarily true. Life is a series of decisions and choices. How we deal with conflict is one of those decisions. When we are frustrated or experiencing some sort of internal turmoil, we tend to take that out on the people around us. This affects our relationships with others. It also affects the choices we make. If we're experiencing internal turmoil or conflict, we might be in a higher emotional state and make different decisions than we would if we weren't in that emotional state. For example, say we have a character who doesn't believe they're worth much. They don't believe that they matter to the world. Well, they might be riskier in that case. Say that this person likes to ride their motorcycle down the interstate at 125 miles per hour, weaving in and out of cars. It gives them a thrill, and again, they don't think they matter, so they don't really care if they get hurt. But what happens if they get in an accident and someone else dies? Well, now that character's internal conflict has forever changed their life, as well as the lives of that deceased character's family and friends. So the internal conflict has directly affected the plot. When you are thinking about how your character's internal conflict can affect the plot, ask yourself how that inner turmoil is going to affect their decision-making. Will they make choices more emotionally and less logically? Will they favor short-term solutions over long-term ones? Will they make riskier decisions than they might otherwise? For example, if you have a wife character who feels a lot of anger because of some sort of internal conflict she's going through, she might throw things at her husband, which is going to affect their relationship. Or you might have a teenage boy character who is so insecure he will do whatever it takes to impress or be a part of a certain peer group. Maybe that means he sleeps with a girl when really he's in love with her brother. So that internal turmoil directly led to that decision that's going to affect the plot. If your character's internal conflict creates some sort of emotion within them, that emotion can lead to decisions that will affect the plot. So that's how person versus self conflict is going to lead to character growth and drive the plot forward. Next, I want to share an editor and author's tips on using person versus self conflict. Person versus self is a type of conflict that tends to make its way into most stories. That's because we as people are constantly learning, growing, and evolving. So we have this internal turmoil that goes along with that. Your characters should have that too. If you find that your stories don't have a lot of person versus self conflict, there's not a lot happening inside your characters, that can be for two reasons. One, you haven't developed your characters. You don't know them well enough to understand what's happening inside them. All you have to do is ask more questions, get to know them a little bit more. The second is you're too nice to your characters. You've created someone who's perfect, who doesn't have any flaws, or who is in a situation that is not going to challenge them. It's not going to force them to learn and grow. They're happy people in happy land. Well, those people and stories aren't fun to read because nothing happens. We don't feel like those characters have earned anything by the end of the story because they were either perfect to start with or they exist in a perfect world. We don't, as people, live that way. So it's really hard to relate to that type of a story. To fix this, give your characters flaws. What's wrong with them? What's a weakness they have, an insecurity, a fear? How can you bring that out in your story and show them overcoming it? That is much more relatable than starting out with someone who doesn't have those things to begin with. Regardless of which type of conflict you're trying to add to your story, start with your characters. Start by getting to know them better and asking questions about how you can challenge those characters. If you want to add person versus self conflict, ask questions about your character's beliefs and how you can challenge them, about their fears, their insecurities, and their weaknesses. So, what inner conflict is your character facing? Share their struggles in the comments below. And for more videos on conflict and other aspects of writing, subscribe to Ignited Ink Writing, a channel dedicated to helping authors like you transform your writing so it lingers with your readers. Because writing that lingers gets remembered and recommended to others. I'm Caitlin Burvey, editor and author. To find out more about me, go to www.ignitedinkwriting.com. There you will find the character creation chart. This is going to help you quickly develop your characters so you can get right to writing that conflict. And if you want to see how I do this, go to caitlinburvey.com, which is where you will find my collection of short stories, When Magic Calls. And now it's your turn to really get to know your characters, their flaws, and goals, so you can use them to create person versus self conflict and ignite your ink.